Well, good morning. I hope that my title has at least piqued your curiosity a little bit. We're talking about the book of First John this week, as I mentioned. And so, if you got some background in Scripture, you might be associating elder with the author of First John and, authentic faith. This is chapel, so probably no surprise there, right? But Tchaikovsky. How on earth does Tchaikovsky fit into this week? Well, here's what happened. I was really excited about being able to share with you some truths and some powerful words from the book of First John. And so I thought, wow, okay, 5 days we have to share this week, and there are 5 chapters in First John, so we'll just go chapter by chapter. But digging into the text a little bit, it became fairly obvious to me that that wasn't going to work so well. John has these themes. First John has these themes. And, you might be reading something in chapter 2, and then the same theme comes up again in chapter 3 and comes up again later. And there's nothing wrong with going chapter by chapter. I think it's a great way to study a book of the Bible. But I didn't think it would work best for us this week. I wanted to explore some of these themes. And I thought, this is a music camp, right? You know, or many of you know, about themes in music, which leads us to Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony. There are themes in the Fifth Symphony that recur throughout the piece. And in fact, I want to share with you just for a few moments this morning some clips from Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, taking the main theme and listening to how it occurs in different movements. So give this a listen. So, themes, right? We're going to be doing a little bit each day with Tchaikovsky, and so we'll have some fun with that, make some more parallels. But let's get back to First John for a minute here. So, when I study a book of the Bible, there's some things that are very, very helpful to do. We want to find out, how is this book structured? We want to know something about the author of the text. We want to know something about the context in which this particular piece of scripture was written. And of course then we want to dig into the content, right? So let's do that a little bit. And now here's another interesting thing about scripture in general, and certainly of 1 John. These chapters, right? We have chapters and then verses. So we can say turn to chapter 3, verse 12 or whatever. So you're aware, right, that these were not in the original text. People have come along and added chapters and verses, and they're very helpful, right? Very helpful to us to get to the same place in Scripture for memorizing and different things like this. But the people who put the chapters and verses in were not necessarily inspired in doing so, right? These are just ways that we catalog. And sometimes if we're only paying attention to a book by chapter, we miss kind of the larger ways that the book moves. And so here's something else we can do. We might think about 1 John being written in movements. See if you're paying attention, piece of candy for this one, for the first person that shouts it out. How many movements were in Tchaikovsky's Fifth? Ah, right. Okay, 4 movements. And interestingly, the book of 1 John, we could say, has 4 movements, 4 kind of major pieces of the book. So there's a prologue that we're going to spend some time in this morning. And then there are kind of 2 major pieces that have these kind of overarching ideas that the other themes fit into. So let me show you how this works. So let's go ahead and pull our Bibles out, if you haven't, and we're going to turn to the book of 1 John. Now I need to caution you, this is different than the Gospel of John. You got to go farther back into the New Testament, close to the end. We're looking for 1 John, which comes right before 2 John and 3 John. Okay? 1 John, and so we're going to come back to the prologue, which is chapter 1, 1 through 4, but let's look at 1:5 for just a moment. I believe this is the beginning of kind of the second movement, right? The first major area after the prologue. John says, "This is the message that we have heard and proclaim to you, that God is light. In him there is no darkness at all." All right, we'll come back to that a little bit later. Skip with me now, if you will, to 3:11. 3:11 is marked up on the screen for you. "For this is the message." You notice a similarity between those 2 passages? "This is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another." And then there's a conclusion. So I'm just going to kind of lay this out a little bit here this morning, and we will come back and dig into each bit of this more thoroughly as we go on. All right? So there's no real literary structure otherwise, except for these kind of major portions of the book and then these themes that run throughout. Let's talk about the author for a moment. Actually, there's no author named in 1 John. So how do we know who wrote it? Well, here's something interesting. There are very similar styles of writing between 1 John and the books that follow, 2 John and 3 John. And in these books, the author is identified as the elder. So based on several things, but one of them being the very similar styles of writing, we assume that the elder of 2 and 3 John is actually the same as the author of 1 John. There's also a lot of stylistic similarities between 1 John and the Gospel of John, as we'll see in just a few minutes. And so, we believe that John, who wrote the Gospel, has to be the same author as these other books, must be the elder. Bible scholars are pretty clear on this. So even though 1 John doesn't have an author named, there's a lot of agreement that the same person wrote this as 2 and 3 John and as the Gospel of John. And there's also one more book that's commonly attributed to this author. Does anybody know? Another piece of candy? Oh, there you go, the book of Revelation, right? So 5 books total are written by this individual. And in Revelation and the Gospel of John, the author is identified as John. Okay, so then who is John? That's the next question we need to answer.